The German word Gestalt means completed whole. The Gestalt principles were developed in the 1920s by German psychologists Max Wertheimer, Kurt Kafka, and Wolfgang Kohler, who wanted to know how humans get meaningful perceptions from chaotic stimuli. They discovered a set of laws that deal with the natural desert to bring order to chaos. The mind informs what the eye sees by perceiving a series of individual elements as a whole. According to this, the sum of the parts does not equal the whole. 6 Gestalt Principles: proximity, similarity, continuity, closure, connectedness, figure ground. Proximity. The principle of proximity states that we tend to perceive elements as a group when they are close to each other. These groups don't sit inside boxes or have clearly delineated borders around them, yet we perceive them as separate clusters of content. We do so because the elements in each section sit close to each other. If you look a little closer, you'll notice subgroups in each group. In group 3, each input field and label are perceived as a separate group. In group 4, each list item is perceived as another. This is the principle of proximity in action. Similarity. Throw a bag of M&Ms on a table and your mind will immediately start to group them by color. Red will be one group, green another, and yellow a third. We're inclined to group elements that look like each other. Dot in the dribble shot below size is used to communicate relationships. Theaters and movies that have the same characteristics are set on tiles that are the same size. By quickly skimming the page, we're able to tell which theaters and movies belong to the same groups. Informative and visually appealing. Continuity. Ever notice how your eyes like to travel along lines, following and flowing with them? Our mind has a tendency to follow paths and group elements that are aligned with each other. This is the principle of continuity. We can use lines to capture and guide users towards important elements within an interface. Creatively uses a series of platforms to engulf and guide users to Asana's tool timeline's value proposition on his landing page. Closure. Given the chance, our mind will opt for simplicity. Since a whole is easier to process than multiple parts, we'll fill in the gaps or connect the dots to complete implied shapes or images. Loaders are a common element in user interfaces today. Whenever a product needs a little more time to complete a task, like refreshing or processing a payment, loaders will let us know the product is still working in the background. Illustrates the principle of closure in her loader below. The moving, developing lines in the animation never really touch each other, and yet we see a circle. Connectedness. Out of all 5 Gestalt principles, connectedness is arguably the easiest to grasp. Connectedness states that we tend to group elements when they are connected to each other. That's it. Many apps feature onboardings these days. These are the first few screens you see when you pop open a new app. Often, they'll feature stunning animations and graphics and will share the best parts of your newly downloaded app with you. We've Sharidan onboarding by Paper Pillar below. In it, the lovely couple lives inside a pink bubble. It houses the character and element around them, grouping them. Figure ground. The figure ground principle states that people instinctively perceive objects as either being in the foreground or the background. They either stand out prominently in the front. The figure ground is a visual relationship between foreground and background. It's a type of perceptual grouping which is necessary for recognizing objects through vision. This series of 3 diagrammatic models explores the concept of figure ground through different methods of making. How are Gestalt principles used in everyday life? In general, the Gestalt principles help us understand how we process visual information, either starting with the whole and then working our way to the parts, or by attempting to break a confusing whole into its simpler component parts. Gestalt principles are principles or laws of human perception that describe how humans group similar elements, recognize patterns, and simplify complex images when we perceive objects. Designers use the principles to organize content in websites and other interfaces so it is aesthetically pleasing and easy to understand. How do you apply Gestalt principles in teaching and learning? 1. Teachers should encourage their students to discover the relationship of the elements that make up a problem. 2. Incongruities, gaps, or disturbances are essential stimuli in the learning process. 3. Educational instruction should be based on the laws of organization. The several Gestalt law principles were similarity, closure, good continuity, good prognance, and figure or ground. These ideas were relevant to USA's future instructors because they defined how individuals organize similar components, discover relationships, and reduce complex images when experiencing objects, which we must know in our learning strategy. Teachers can encourage learners to study how different parts of a topic overlap. Discrepancies, inconsistencies, and disruptions in the learning experience are vital signs. Future instructors must be capable of adapting these basic and easy to understand teaching approaches so that our pupils can learn more about what we educate. Reference. Members.